right. Okay, we are going live. All right. So we didn't have any agenda items yet. There are a couple of things that we could talk about. One is this carryover, because we keep trying to get Michelle and Bryce both on this call at the same time about DevOps stuff. I don't think it's super urgent though, and it might really better fit into some stuff that we're running proposals for right now at Suffolk, which would mean like it wouldn't be worked on for a couple of months, and it might be someone who's not on the team yet. The next one was the thing Lily brought up, which I had asked her about late last week, which was, or maybe it was even this weekend, how to integrate interview that stuff with like data only representation of the interview. And it's important to say it's the completed interview. Right? That symbol specific representation. We could talk a little bit more about what I talked about with the save sessions stuff. Not that urgent. I think I know the shape of things from the many other conversations we've had about it. Just need to finish implementing it. Let's see. I feel like I'm going to just pull up our GitHub and just see if there's anything else that came up. Does anyone have anything else that they wanted to add?
I
type it in.
Do specifically, now that Michelle is here, if we get the chance, we should talk about getting. I realize I haven't actually made any PRs about this. And I think I started working on it after you were out, but I've added a accessibility checker to Kiln. So like you have the option of when you're on a page, you say, and I check the accessibility of this page. It's not very fast. And so it's kind of like, you can't do it automatically. And for some reason, it takes like 5 to 10 seconds at the end of each page, but it works and it can give you like reports for all of the pages, which is what we needed to do because there wasn't an easy way to step through and like say, oh, run over this whole interview because you have to click through it. The accessibility checker doesn't do that. But I'm mostly I just want to try and get that in and trying to talk about like what the best way to actually get this in, like compared to what the sort of semi-hacky state it's in now.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, I'll ask more questions.
Yeah. That could be I feel like that might just be a bit of Michelle and I going back and forth, and so we can either do it up front, but I don't want to like get rid of or get in the way of other things that do need all of us here.
Sure.
And yeah, I know for Michelle, maybe this is the best time since you've already blocked it off and may not have time later this week. So that's fine too. I think it's okay if it's just the two of you. Sometimes we have those conversations during this time.
Yeah.
Anything else that anyone else wanted to add?
I have a whole bunch of questions related to the project I'm working on. But it's going to take probably some discussions. I don't know if we have enough time.
I imagine we do. That seems like a good thing to do. What is this an MLRI one, Lily, or is it the interview stats?
And both on the Weaver side and on the interview stats side.
What's the form?
No, it's the survey type interview.
Survey stuff. Okay, got it. So not just interview stuff. That's what you're saying, right?
Right, not a particular form.
Okay, that seems like a good agenda, and I guess we could just see. Oh, I have a draft here for. Oh, this is actually approved. Okay, never mind. I should just merge that. Where do the tests run now? AL Kiln tests, Michelle? On
Actions tab. That's where
no, which server do they run on against?
the test server.
Okay.
As long as the repository is using the repo wide settings, the organization settings, which this should be.
I don't think we haven't manually overridden any of those.
Just want to make sure I can remember that. All right. So I think that's probably why we're sometimes getting timeouts on the test server. It's probably when the test runs that is really particularly slow. Okay. Just was connecting the dots there.
Nice.
Um,
Great. Sounds
That's
very useful.
It's not a problem necessarily. Let me see. I felt like there might have been some other things that needed discussion that I'd opened issues for recently. I'm not really seeing anything here that's a recently opened issue. Let me just take a quick peek at the assembly line. I think it was mostly the thing that we're talking about already, which is about question independent. Yeah. Oh yeah, okay, here's one. I just wondered what people thought about this idea. It seemed like it was worth discussion. I wrote it as an issue saying we should do it. And then maybe should we talk about header size questions, Bryce? Was that between Lily and Michelle might have good ideas about that CSS stuff?
We can, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. This might be a really quick one. Has anyone ever used like the little feature tour animation? And what do people think about using that? So if we have this new save feature,
Where is the?
I made the issue for it here, number 459, and I looked it in the agenda.
Oh.
So I don't really know the name of this thing, but I think that's the best name for it that I could find. And I found an article that was relevant when I Googled it. But what I was thinking is when someone gets to the first screen, especially if they log in for the first time, we want to highlight for them that they can where to get to the save and load feature. So I was thinking like a little animated arrow that pops up the first time, something like that, that visually draws their attention to this menu. And it might say, click here to save or click here to load. Rather than a screen that interrupts their flow for every interview that they run. So that might be wrong. Maybe we think they do need it to be this interstitial screen that they always see.
I think it's something we can test out. It might be easier to test out an interstitial screen because it might be something people are more likely to give us feedback on. And we could check after a while and say, you know, how do you find this? As opposed to, you know, how are you experiencing it? As opposed to them just not noticing the menu items, right? I know that might not be our ideal
Big problem,
starting
the
state.
big challenge with it, unfortunately, and part of is that it's going to be hard to add that to existing interviews.
Oh,
Not impossible. I think if most interviews already use like the AL intro screen variable and they haven't customized that front page, we can make that itself be a little sub block so it invokes two screens instead of just one. I guess that would be the solution, right?
sure.
That could be to force people to add an extra screen to every interview. But
I mean, just because they have that, I mean, we could do, like, it doesn't mean that the menu item doesn't exist. We just wouldn't be able to test it out with users there. Actually, don't know how to do it conditionally, but it could give us an A/B test, depending on how easy that is.
If we could make it like a flash kind of symbol that or arrow that just points to the menu and then disappear. That would be
Yeah.
minimum.
Well, I think I've seen it usually done as a pulse, like a color pulse.
Mhm. I mean, there are a lot of different ways that people have done it. So let's see. This is good because it has some examples. Like here, it's just showing how they fly in the chat feature. That's not that relevant to us. Similarly here, this just animates in to draw your attention to it. The point is like peripheral vision is caught by, your attention is caught by the movement. It's just showing
Yeah.
the animation for collapsing and hiding a feature. I felt like
Yeah,
I've seen this feature a bunch, but I couldn't find it quickly when I Googled it. Sorry, Bryce.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when I was reading through this particular linked article, I didn't think, at least I didn't like any of the examples on here, and or they just weren't applicable to what we're doing because they're not like slowly show an arrow when you scroll down as like something, as something becomes more valid that you could scroll back up or whatever. But like that's not what we're doing. And the only other time that I've seen stuff like this is, or at least the time that I've run into it recently, are like demos where it's like there are a lot of different steps, and it's like, oh, like for example, it was I think it was the Contentful site that I got on for the first time. It's like, oh, we'll walk you through all the steps to make a blog model or like a blog content type, and it like sort of like I think it was like blurred a bit of everything else, and it was like, oh, you can click here. And then it sort of just stepped you through each of those things. But I don't really think that's what we're looking for either, because we just want like to point out one specific thing. We don't have a large complex like path that someone has to go through a whole bunch of other UI stuff that they might have to ignore.
I should rephrase this to be a broader goal, because the goal isn't really to have a feature animation. It's to say, how can we let people discover this feature? Right?
Yeah, how can we just point it out?
So I mean, my thought is like people don't, a menu is a logical place to go for a feature like that, but the value of saving and loading might be high enough to like having it buried in the menu is negative. That's the challenge. I mean, but we can easily say there's so many features that we can say are important enough to highlight. So where else would we put it? We could put it in this top navigation. We talked about potentially putting it in the footer.
Having it be visible would allow us to have one of the slide in animations. That would be, I think, something. to
Yeah,
keep in
yeah,
mind.
that sounds good. Maybe put it right next to the menu, but hide it. And then once you created something, added something to the menu, then you make that error visible, but and only for like a short time. And then it's hidden again.
Maybe.
We could make it something we only demonstrate when someone creates a new account. So that's something to keep in mind too. So
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, right on account creation. But
at least the first time they run an interview after they create their account.
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be used for multiple purposes once it works, right?
That's another point. So like, I think it'd be interesting to see if this is a helpful feature in DocAssemble interviews for anything. Another reason why I was thinking of this is because our DocAssemble interviews are very static, and I've gotten, when we were working on Up to Code, that was a lot of feedback we got from people in the community. It was kind of funny, like overwhelmingly, they're like, it's so sad. There's no color. They had a lot of feedback on the visual appearance of it. And I think adding color was a simple thing we can do, but there are no dynamic elements really in DocAssemble interviews. Those can be distracting, but they can also help users feel welcomed in an app, I guess. I don't know. So it's like, hey, if we do this for this thing, is it going to be useful for anything else?
It could be because if you look at other websites, I mean, how people interact with other apps or whatever online, they see this new trend of all these colors actions. So they are kind of getting that mode. And then when they come here, oh, everything's so quiet. So plain. That's the contrast, I think, that they feel.
Yeah. I think visual elements could do kind of a heck of a lot. So I'm not sure that adding this kind of complexity is like the best approach to
Yeah,
solving that problem. Like
Yeah.
I do think that visual elements could
When you say
Yeah,
visual,
balance.
just
what are you thinking?
colors and shapes and
Mhm.
textures and things.
Like you've gotten, I was gonna say for up to code, you did that, or you got, I remember you got that feedback before you like added the whole additional visual style that it has now, right?
Yep.
Okay.
That's definitely true. Yeah, it was just this screen, I think, right? I think the colors were still the black nav bar, which we don't
Yeah.
use those that are default for assembly line interviews anymore. That was partly inspired by the same feedback. Why I thought we should change it. Yeah, it's much more visually appealing now than it was originally.
Oh yeah, that's
But-
much better.
Still very plain, despite
Mm.
being more visually appealing.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I mean, just texture to the buttons could do a lot there, I think.
yeah, it'll be interesting to know more, like what kind of things we should. I don't know really a good sense of like what that. I don't know what that's meant. Yeah, I mean, it's still very static, but yeah, it's definitely visually more appealing. And this was a big change, adding these buttons with this different style. But
Yeah.
interesting. Anyway, I mean, there's something to think about there overall. Maybe the broader question is what people have some thoughts about the save and load feature. So maybe one thing I'm hearing is people really do like the idea of having a dedicated button for it. I don't think there's really room in the header, but it could probably fit in the footer if it was a button without any lead text.
Yeah.
Because here,
They're
It's
different
already
screens,
just
right?
barely
Like
put
they
it.
have to lead into different screens. Yeah, we already cut off part of
The-
feedback.
The thing I think info about could definitely be just an icon, by the way.
Maybe all of these should be icons if we're talking about adding more things.
Share, I
doesn't
think,
really
isn't
fit.
as clear, but
Worst case, we make them icons on mobile only. That would be
That's
better,
true.
I think. But sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead, Michelle. I interrupted you.
I just wanted to clarify, is this to save this interview? Because I think having a save that is not save this interview is potentially fairly confusing.
What would be the other option? I'm not sure if I know what you
So
mean. I
save
believe
this
it is
interview
saved.
versus, okay, then that's fine. I thought this was the save answers so you can load them on a different interview feature.
It is, right?
Yeah, but what else?
So-
What kind of saving would there be? I'm not sure if I understand. What you mean.
Just
Things
save
save.
your interview progress. But that's when
That's-
you're
That
not
happens
signed in.
Yeah, but that is confusing. That's a good point. Like if users might not know that, and if we just have a save icon there, it's like, oh, I have to click to save.
Well, I mean, even I'm not sure what can be done to clarify it.
So, I mean, it is an interesting question because the fact that DocAssemble has sessions is great for usability, right? People don't have to intentionally save stuff.
But they don't know it.
They don't know it, but it's hard for the part of reusing them because you don't want to have to choose from a million sessions you started and abandoned and then never intended to intentionally save, right?
Yeah, I mean, if it were something like save user data or
Well,
something, like I'm just trying
We
to
already
think
came
of
up with
wording, but
that on a previous call. We came up with the idea of calling it answer set. So I think that was pretty well
That's-
thought out. We covered a bunch of different alternatives, and that was what we landed on as being the clearest. So, but you're right that if we add it as a prominent feature, that's a button on every screen, that would confuse people.
Sure.
No, that is for the, it's not for the developers, right? It's for the public users, right? Let's see.
Yep.
Okay, now would they get confused about between this new save feature versus the Docker assemble default session save?
So that's what we're saying.
Yeah, but do we like? We're saying people don't know the default saving feature. So number one, do we need to alert them about it, educate them about it? Number two, if we make everyone understand that there is that default saving feature, then we would need to show the difference between these two.
I mean, there's also the thought that does it matter, right? Because if they think they're saving their interview, it's not like their interview isn't being saved. It's just that their answer set is also being saved. And is it a distinction that they need to know at the time that they're saving it? I will say that I find, and I believe I've understood that other people find a save button very reassuring in these kinds of things, as opposed to just having a, invisible automatic save.
That's
Um,
true. But the save feature that we've implemented, that I've been working on, is kind of heavy, right? You click on the button, you say what you want to call it, takes you to a confirmation screen, and click next.
Maybe it's you could. What was it? Oh,
Maybe if there were like an explanation on that first screen, people would just press
Yeah.
it once and then it would be an uncomfortable experience, but it would only be once as opposed to.
yeah, or yeah, I was thinking like have an
Okay.
explain, like if we were able to just show like a save button, have an explainer that's like your answers or like your progress through the interview is saved automatically, and like have it highlighted or like just called out, like that's the first thing that someone sees, and so they can see that and go back, and then have like an additional thing that, or like a short, even just like a short sentence that like explains, like I guess we already have that, but just explain it a bit more, that like if you want to save and like load or reuse your answers later, keep doing this
In a different interview, yeah.
Yeah.
And that it's just some of their answers as well.
Yeah, but
Well,
as long
it's
as
not really
like,
just some of their answers, it's all their answers. I mean, we can't save
Oh,
files,
really?
images, really. The only things we filter out are intentionally not things the user is going to ever define. It's like all of the built-in variables that we're trying to screen out. Things that might be interview specific, but they're not user choices. Things like, is the person always the plaintiff or defendant, for example? I believe delete that.
yeah, but we also, that repopulates by itself.
It'll be
Or is-
repopulated by itself by the
is
interviewer. Exactly.
recalculated by a code block. So yeah.
So the user does not need to know that it's not all of their answers, I don't think. The only thing they should know is
Okay.
they have to re-sign the form. And if they uploaded images, which only a few of our forms allow uploads, those need to be redone. That's what they need to know.
Okay.
So maybe that should also be listed on the saving screen. So that
I think-
you set up
Well,
no.
I mean, that seems pretty like seamless.
once you are
Like,
you-
it doesn't
you-
seem like it would
Once you
interfere.
use it for a while, then you understand. But for someone who just got onto that screen,
But they don't need to know that it doesn't save whether they're the plaintiff or the defendant, right? Like, if you think about that, that's not something they,
oh no, I'm
You're
just
gonna
saying
need to
like
know.
what will be saved by this feature, what will not be saved by this feature.
I'm gonna write that down as an idea. I worry about this becoming too cluttered. But I do think there's a list of things people might want to know. So I think it's worth us thinking of all of them and then deciding which things to list on that screen. Something that's we could consider is this is the save answer set feature. We've already talked about why like a user profile system might be helpful. And that's still on our roadmap. So that might be a place where we would save someone's signature. We could save their signature in the user profile if they wanted to reuse it. I don't know if that's a good idea or not. It'd be a good idea for some kinds of users, but not others. It'd be good for an attorney who has to sign a bunch of stuff on a daily basis. Would not be as good for a user where the signature screen is a confirmation that they understand what they just filled in, right? So, tangent, I just want to point out, we don't have to consider user profile type features here. Those could be handled later.
I think it will not be very crowded on the page. Just like 2 sentences, right? One says your session is automatically saved. And another says if you want to use your answers for different form, click the following or whatever. But such and such things are not saved, cannot be saved for different form.
Maybe. I think it's something we'd have to see.
I mean, we're using a save icon here. I guess another thought could be we could use like a copy button instead.
Oh, copy. I like that
In
idea.
some ways, that's what it's really doing. Call it clone answers instead of clone. I think is not actually a good term. Copy might be clear enough. Clone is a little bit too scary term, too technical.
Yeah.
Well, if you have paste next to it, it would be more intuitive, right? You click one icon lets you copy, which is save, and then click another paste, which is load.
That's true.
Well, and now I'm thinking, because that's 2 steps, but we want one clear action when they click the button, the save button, because that doesn't copy and paste, but it results in.
No, they just point to different screens.
What about something that just said like duplicate?
Mm.
Just say. Okay, I thought it would
Or
make
copy. I think it's worth putting copy there too. 'Cause-
Yeah. Okay, I thought this would be like a quick technical question, but it's really a deeper question about how to. Yeah, I mean, so I will say I've used LHI's system, and it's very confusing that the first thing you see is a list of answers. People can't understand easily how to start the form, but that's partly because it's not in the same Chrome. It's a different interface that you get to. I can show people that again really quickly if they want to see. I don't think everyone has seen it. So.
I don't think I.
Yeah, all right. Let's see how I can find a form. Oh, the best place might be Washington Wild. Okay, so here's the interface you see on Law Help Interactive. So okay, first of all, this is confusing. We don't know what to do here. That's not really relevant though. this. Let's assume they are signed in, and that's when they would interact with this feature. Oh shit, did I just make a new form? No, okay. So you see this. This is, I think, very confusing. I guess the continue button is on top now. That's a move, and before it was below. But here's a list of answers. You click on the answers, and it starts the interview with those answers.
Preloader.
But it's a totally different interface, right? So, and something that's here that they've had to do because the feature is very hard to discover. And you do have to intentionally click the save button. All the Washington forms that they've built them such that you click, they have this visual walkthrough inside the interview because they felt people weren't discovering the feature. I believe this feature is very underused on a Help Interactive.
Okay.
Other thing I did want to say just about clutter, which is not an end all to this discussion, is just users I have found in testing really want to read everything. There's a lot of users who are slow readers of our tools, and they want to read everything on the screen because they're afraid that they're going to miss something. So it's very important to say as little as the person needs, I think. I find that to be like a really important design goal, is to not say too much on any given screen. From my experience of people just getting stuck and overwhelmed when there's too much to read.
Okay. Do they get stuck and overwhelmed, or do they just read it?
They do. They get lost because it's, you get, by the time you get to the bottom, you forget what it said at the top. That is an experience for a lot of our users for our ProSafe tools.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean we don't have important things to tell them. It does seem like at least some of these things are. I mean, we should tell them, if we have a save button on every screen, we should say, hey, you don't need to use this button every time. And then if we have, I felt like we don't need that if it's hidden in the menu because, well, we probably still should. I don't really know though. Think about that.
You only need to use this when you want to copy answers.
I do realize from talking this through that there's a lot of assumptions here that won't be clear to our new users, especially because they haven't used DocAssumption before. So we do have to change it now. It's helpful to think it through here. But I mean, I guess let's release it and then we'll see. But I think we'll probably hear from some of the other partners too, what they like and what they say about it.
I was thinking of changing contents to changing preview contents to something like saved values. Just
What's this?
as a note on that page that says preview contents that shows the JSON object. Where it just says, I was just thinking it would say saved values or saved answers.
I think we probably will take it out. I don't think it's helpful for end users to see. But I think
for developers. Yeah, but just saying.
Yeah, we can make it into a developer.
Preview
feature.
contents. I just find contents a bit confusing, but
yeah, I haven't really paid attention to that screen to decide what goes there. That's a good note. Okay. Thank you for taking a lot of time to cover that. That was good to think through. I don't think I have a lot of actionable things yet though, but I think where I'm going to land is I'm going to add in some disclaimer here to clarify that you don't need to always do it. We don't know a good place to put it that's more visible, that's not also more confusing. So I'm gonna just keep it in the menu for now.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
I don't want to rename it either yet. Even though it seems like maybe we would have to make it more visible. It's because we spent a long time thinking through it. Okay, and we don't have any actionable things about animations, right? But maybe
I think if we, yeah, I think my take was if we figure out the right UI, we can figure out if we need animations. And if that's just for discovery, and if it's animations for liveliness, I think adding like evaluating things with color and maybe some smaller per page things might help. So
do we want to open an issue, separate issue for adding interactivity to more screens or thinking about it generally, or are we good with just saying it was really only relevant to this feature for now and we can revisit it later if we have another specific?
yeah, we could add another feature. I don't know if it ended up being closed, but I know at one point there was a like things should be livelier feature, or sorry, things should be livelier issue. I have no idea which one it was. I'm gonna have to look for it, but.
I know we talked about, there were some specific issues about like adding color and other different ways of adding more visual
Maybe maybe that was why.
rest. Okay. Well, maybe I'll go ahead and open it and we can always close it to duplicate later. Okay. Is this potentially a fast one given, yeah, the size refactor? Do we need some feedback on that?
So what was your state of the understanding? Because I feel like my state of the understanding may have been too specific to the one or two changes I made to DocAssemble.
So did that get merged, by the way?
No, he made some comments over the weekend that I was going to try and address today.
Okay. So DocAssemble, well, you should explain it, I guess. First, what are we talking about when we say header size and why is it relevant to accessibility? Maybe people are.
Yeah, sure. So just from the accessibility perspective, you're supposed to have all of your headers are supposed to go in order. And specifically, you're not supposed to skip or just like omit specific ones, because it can, I think, at least the screen readers I've tried, like they still sort of work, but they'll still say like the specific header size. But it's one of those things, I've only tried one screen reader and there are a lot of different ones. And so I think the idea is it can break some. And if it doesn't break, it'll at least be a confusing experience for people using screen readers to try and jump from, okay, I know I'm at header 2 and wait, now I'm at like header 4, like 4 or 5. How did I get there? Where was 3? Like, am I missing something? And so that's like just the main accessibility part of it. And the DocAssemble issue is that they use the default bootstrap, which I have looked at the default bootstrap and the header size 2 is smaller than header size 1. But at least when I look at it on DocAssemble's, like DocAssemble sites, header size 2 is just like huge. And so I think actually in our suggestions and several other places in DocAssemble, like it's just completely one is skipped, sometimes 2 is skipped, and it just goes straight to 3. And so to make things actually compliant, I moved things. I tried to make them bigger and just like match the header size, but it still isn't great visually. And so I think the idea is, how do we fix that? What are you going to say, Michelle?
One thing is to make headers scoped. So like there's headers in the general document, and then there's headers in the question body, which can be managed differently. And I'm not sure if the title of the page is a title or a header, but it could be made a title. So
it's
that
a title.
Isn't
the
in that
one in the nav bar, you mean, right?
That's no, not in the nav bar. The
What do you-
one at the top of the question.
Yeah, that's the question itself. And that's actually one part of the issue is that that specifically is a header 1, I
Class
think.
H3.
Sorry, it's a header 1, but he's like Jonathan explicitly sets a class 3. And that's one of the reasons why like it's hard to make everything else look smaller and look the right size is because that's hard coded to class 3. And no one's really going to want to make it class 1 again because it's going to look huge.
You shouldn't be using those kinds of, that's where I'm saying like scoped things, and that's where I'm saying that could be a title, I believe, if I remember what title is semantically.
So no, title, I think title is like would be AL question test up in the top left.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's
talking about
exactly
title class, the HTML. tag.
No, I meant
What?
HTML tag
what I meant, sorry.
title. But okay,
It's
then
title
then I'm not
row,
remembering title
there's some
semantics
class,
correctly
there's
then.
some bands.
But yeah, definitely shouldn't be using that as the styling. I've noticed that in the past, and shouldn't be using that as styling unless he's, uses other consistent styling that's in line with that.
I think
Well,
what happened is that Jonathan,
I was gonna say, unfortunately, the changes he made to my more recent PR do exactly that. I had changed things to just like, okay, match the header. And he went through and suggested that I change the classes to match the aesthetic size that he wants, or essentially the aesthetic size he had. So
If you change the CSS at the same time, he might be more, I don't know, I haven't seen the PR, but if you change the CSS size at the same time, he might be more amenable to it. And my suggestion would be to make a scoped. So inside, for example, class container, or even a class, or even IDDA question, have a whole set of header styles that is different from the rest of the document.
So the scoped part, I'm not like, I've never heard of it. It's a style thing, right? Because at least I've come across, I'm trying to like look it up right now, and there's some things that are saying it's deprecated.
There might be some official like scoped something or other. Maybe it's been a while since I've looked at that. If you link me to what you're looking at, that would be useful. But
Yeah,
the
I'll send that in. Sorry.
what I'm talking about is I'm just trying to like describe a concept where inside a question block, W3 schools, I wouldn't trust anything that
Yeah, I know.
it
I know they're not the best. I was trying to find better ones. Sorry.
yeah,
But
no,
but
that's
the issue
okay.
is I can't find anything about
No,
that. That's what I guess.
that's the
Sorry,
scope.
clarify what you're saying.
Yeah, that's the scoped attribute. So I'm just describing something where I'm saying that inside a DA question, there would be a set of styles that is separate from.
it would just be like this DA question H1, right? And this
Oh, just
I mean,
changing the
yes,
selector.
that's
rather
not
than
the-
using a class, whatever it would be.
Yeah, and hash next to DA question.
So that's I mean, that's another, but that is the issue is that's another big breaking change that I don't.
Yeah, I think that is the reason for this class H3. I believe I remember attending a session at ITC that Jonathan also attended and was influenced by someone who was an accessibility person who was like, I think probably this used to just be an H3. And then Jonathan was like, oh, that's breaking screen reader semantics. Let's make it an H1, but then
It
apply
just
this
breaks all the
class
styles,
to
but
make
that's,
destroy people's.
but DA question H1 would break things.
No, so I'm saying, okay, so the state of things of right now is if you just use H1, it's way too big, but it's the right one.
Yeah,
And if we then changed it such that every time you're using H1 through H6 in a DA question, we automatically apply the class DA3 or like the right sizing class. So it looks the right size, but people can just use the headers without marking them. Then that will change everyone's existing interview to look smaller than they actually are.
it shouldn't, because it shouldn't affect, it's not going to decrease what's there. It's just going to, you're just going to make it the same size as H3. You can just make it the same size as H3.
So let's see if I have like a,
Yeah, but I'm saying if someone already has an interview that's like H1 or H2, and we were forcing it to be H3, then like it might have been really big in their existing interview, and we're gonna make it H3 and make it smaller. So that's the thing. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get it into DocuSimple Core. We can look into doing that for our interviews in our style if we want to.
Your H3 is,
I just wanted to show.
and
like,
your
a-
H4 is
Yeah,
3.
four is missing.
All
one,
right.
but
You're right. They're all
there.
missing. So this is
Yeah.
bigger than the H1,
I see
here.
what you're trying to.
So is H2.
Well,
Yeah.
and so is H2.
if there is an AL class that we've added to our DA question, we can make it AL specific if that's what we want.
Because we could attach it to the
Yeah.
semantic container class. We don't have to worry about people overriding it individually in their libraries.
As long as we provide a unique selector, yes.
I mean, one thing to note is that we have a ton of existing interviews that are using heading level 4 for text inside sub-question. At least I do, because that was just always my strategy.
But it can still be the same size. Heading level 4 can still be the same size.
But it's broken
It's
in
true.
terms of screen readers.
It's true.
I guess that's irrelevant, though. It's not really the same question we're trying to solve. We're just talking about if we did
Yeah.
new stuff, how can we make them right without breaking old stuff. But
Yeah.
obviously, to fix that heading level 4, we have to change the old stuff, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So why is Jonathan not worried about the accessibility?
Well, it is accessible. It's just weird, right? Like,
I mean, theoretically, he could just, when he generates the question text, he could do the same as he's done for the header 1. Is he could add the header 3, header 4, header 5, header 6 classes instead, but like that's
That's
still
the same
not
as the
good.
CSS, right? Like that's
That's-
just exactly what CSS does.
That's what the CSS would do.
Yeah.
It would just, it's not good practice. It's not clear, but
Yeah.
I mean, he could do that, and then that would solve the problem in the way that he has solved the problem already. It would just break everybody's, like you said, right?
Well, I think that's what I was, yeah.
maybe. Yeah, I guess it would, because the H4s would break, right?
Yep.
Specifically. Those would become tiny, teeny tiny.
Well, at that point, I think you'd do stuff like using bold or using a slightly different color. So
Well,
It
if you
wouldn't-
wanted
it
it to
wouldn't-
look the same, you would just go back to having it be heading 2. That would be the, if you're changing it anyway, you would change it that way, probably.
I don't know what you mean to change, which thing would be changed back to heading 2.
You're saying you could use bold or italics instead, but I would just, if it were me, I would just edit the interview once the global CSS change was made to make it.
No, I know, but I'm saying if we change everyone's, we could make it less.
That's still
of a
changing
breaking
semantics
change.
though. That's like, it's less of a breaking change, I guess, but that's like bold is not the same thing as a header. And that specifically is one of the issues, like that would be an accessibility issue. If you had something marked as like header 4 or even header, you went down to header 6. I don't see many people who do, but if you did, that's like changing it to bold is not the same thing. You can't find it on a screen reader. It doesn't like officially break
No,
up
you
the
wouldn't
page
change
anymore.
it. You wouldn't change it to just bold. I would say you'd be changing the style to bold. You wouldn't be changing the
Okay, sorry.
wrapper to bold. Yeah, no, I'm just talking about styles.
Just okay. That's fair.
Semantically, it would be the same.
I think there's
That's fair.
no way around the fact that this is going to break people's styles because they're using them wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
I'm
think
just saying
we should
we could
convince
make it
Jonathan,
less
since it's breaking
intrusive or
change,
more.
to do it in a way
We
that
could-
doesn't really confuse people.
Yeah,
'Cause
we
I-
could just make it less obtrusive or more obtrusive. Instead of being tiny, it could just be a different style. That's all.
Well, what
Yeah.
style we choose, I don't think is that relevant if we're changing people's styles. I guess you're right. We can make it a little bit less impact. I don't think people want us to choose their style for them. And we want to let
They
people
don't.
be
We
able
have
to.
we've run into this
But
before
we
where
would-
we've
we
made
would
some
be
style
too.
changes in assembly line and a layout like Matt was immediately like, not in a bad sense, but just like, hey, you'll change styles and my interview looks different. How do I stop this?
Yep.
So
I mean, but the thing is, people build Bootstrap themes. I have built many Bootstrap themes, and then the styles don't match already. So I think it's more broken the way Docassemble does it now, by visually not matching the hierarchy, and it's just the H1 that's weird instead of all of them. So
Well, it's actually just the question title. If you do H1 in the sub question, it's not.
But
That's
wouldn't
part of
do
the
that,
problem.
right? No one should do that if they're trying to follow the semantics
Yeah.
and using a Bootstrap theme generator. They're
Yeah.
not going to use the H1 because they know it's already the question title is H1 already.
I think you're only supposed to ever have one H1 per page anyway. So
Yes, you are. Well, sorry, that's at least what I remember too about it.
that's my understanding.
It should be less emphatic, so I don't think I've read this stuff recently. Well, it doesn't seem like Jonathan's going to want to do anything that's breaking, but I think there's two problems. Like, one is right now, you have things that look like H3. So if you've made your other headings match, you actually have to make everything much larger than it really needs to be. Or, I don't know what else the other options are. Is this the normal sized H1 here? Is it just about the relative thing? But
Should be.
That is the regular
Normally it's-
H1, yep.
2.5 rem, that's normal.
Well, that's the normal Bootstrap style.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty sure.
Honestly, it would look fine if that was the size here.
Hey, you know,
Or change to capital uppercase.
If you made this H1 a little bit bigger and the rest just followed in order, that would be fine for everybody, probably.
probably.
Maybe not, but it would be at least less breaking than making all of these headings change in size.
You could just remove the H3. Yeah.
So is that what we should do? Just remove
That's the thing that's added by Jack.
or make the class H3.
Well, but then if you make the class H3 as big as H1, then anything with the H3 class is going to be as big as H1.
That is true.
Maybe
exactly what we're saying.
that's a thing we could do in Docassemble. We already have ways of like setting CSS and like, I don't know. I don't think there would be anything that we could get Docassemble to do to change to like, oh, don't add the H3 class to the question, but maybe there's more configuration we could do. Like
we could
Docassemble
do-
to
we could
style in
do-
that first question.
We could do anything we could do H1 class H3, H2 class H3, H3 class H3, and make them the correct sizes. Like
No,
we
but I'm
could
just
just
saying,
do
like, we
all
don't-
of them that way.
You don't really want to do that though, right? Because then you're looking at your
but-
Bootstrap theme and the previews don't match what you actually get.
No, what I'm
You won't be able to work with the designer easily. We don't want to add
no what
more-
what I'm saying is that if anywhere else, right, Jonathan here has done H1 with the class H3.
Mhm.
So if we make anything with the class H3 be size H1, then if Jonathan has anywhere else done H2 with the class H3, then it will be as large as H1. And so we would want to make a provision for that as well. That's all I'm saying. Is that too many H's?
I think you're saying if we make a patch to CSS, we want to patch all of them in case there's some other weird
Yeah.
consistency that we would get. Let's just
Yeah.
do a quick grep. I don't know that that does happen, but it might. I imagine it's just in the interview streams where he made these changes because he was thinking about accessibility there, but.
Are we trying to fix some bugs or
Yeah, this I'm sorry.
What's the motive for this?
So you said the motive is
It might not be, it'd be H3, and it might not be between quotes because it might be in the middle of a class. So,
It might not, yeah, but.
and it would be H3 that we're worried about,
Mhm.
not H4.
So you're saying if there are other places where it would get bigger, but it only really matters if the other size is relative to that, right?
It does it all over the place.
These seem to all be the same thing though.
It does seem to be in
They're just different branches of logic.
H1. They're all H1, H3 right now, but there could be class equals something else space H3. So
I don't think so, but it's, I mean, obviously it's possible, but I don't think so. Given the context of it, it's an unadorned header that he's changed to make the semantic.
it's true.
It's not likely. So of course, there's all kinds of
He
things.
probably has a lot of extra classes on the containers.
But he
I
does
don't
he
think
does have a few of them, like telephone assistance and live chat and preview down at the bottom, if you'll see.
So it seems like most of these have to do with different variations on the heading, whether there's decorations or not. For example, no, maybe that's not true. But it seems to be all applied to GA main question.
Other than the ones at the bottom, where you have telephone assistance,
Right.
live chat, and preview.
Well, can we just
What's an example?
create
I don't really care about that.
two dummy text that's H1 and H2, but hide them? Would that pass the test?
that doesn't.
No,
Because it looks like Jonathan
no,
just
because they have no
probably more.
content, and it would be more confusing to.
That would be more confusing because then people might be expecting to see, it's just probably just as confusing because it's either you skip H1 or an H2 or like, sorry, you skip H2 and then someone's like, where did H2 go? Where did it go? And then worse, it's like screen reader reads out like section header 2, section header 3, and it's like nothing was read. And so they're more likely to think that it just couldn't read what was on the screen as opposed to like there specifically not being anything there.
But it looks like Jonathan just pushed every H class, I mean, down to 2 levels. And that's probably, he must have had a reason.
only
Maybe
2.
they just
only
look
has
too
2.
big. And I mean, he would know that he could just change the size to a proper size, but he chose this way. There must be some reasons.
We could ask.
I think it's I believe that it was because he saw this accessibility presentation and he wanted to fix the semantic ordering of the header tags without breaking anybody's existing interview. I think that is what he'll tell us. So I think he added the class equals H3 because it originally was an H3. I vaguely remember this from like 2 or 3 years ago.
And that feels right, given how he's responded to the PR that I made. That was other like in the package management page, changing a bunch of header sizes. And he has suggested that they still have the exact same header size or like bootstrap class of header size that they were before. So
That makes everyone's themes that they generate broken from the beginning. They can't actually preview the real size of the tags. And you can't use Bootstrap to calculate the relative size correctly either. That was a big pain when I did the theme for Up to Code, actually. Most of the other times I've been doing this, I haven't had to change the fonts at all or tried to use specific metrics for header sizes. But when you do, all your work is undone by that stupid tag.
So I guess I'm still having difficulty to understand why is it that we have to fix it now, but he doesn't. But he also cares about accessibility.
Well,
because at this point, it's less of an accessibility issue and it's more of an aesthetic issue. It's what
And a
size.
and a backwards compatibility issue.
Yeah, and a backwards compatibility issue. So it's like, now it's like, well, this was the size that it was before, and it's presumably has always been before. It's always been the size of a header 3. And now you could change what that header 3 looks like, but not everyone's going to want to do that. Not everyone's going to like that. And I don't know.
Yeah, but why do we want to change it?
so the reason, Lily, is because we're fine if we just use the title or the sub question tag, right? The problem is when we want to add another heading level in the sub question. Right now, to make it visually look right, we have to jump down to H4, but that would break accessibility. We should use H2. But if we want H2 to be smaller than H1, we have to then add some custom CSS to that, which makes it not actually be the size of an H2.
Yeah, I get that part, but my my question is that why Jonathan doesn't have to solve it in the way that we have to solve it?
Because he only cared about solving it for the question and not for the sub-question. Because there's no way to specify the class of a header with Markdown. So there's no way to get those special semantic classes
Unless you just start
unless you
writing
hard code
HTML.
HTML.
No one's going to do that.
And he's saying we can add those to everything, but then everyone's themes will be broken, which I think is
Right,
stupid.
right. So it's not I don't know. I just feel
Well,
like I don't see
you
the
should fix it.
importance of it, but it seems like it requires a lot of work to make it right.
I think that what maybe we could try, I don't know what Jonathan thinks about feature flags. Maybe we could try making this a backwards incompatible change that's controlled by configuration option.
This might be a silly question, but I don't know everything about CSS. Can you, in CSS, you define a class that just, or like in like a normal, make a normal CSS rule, but instead of like, here are the styles for that rule, just say, the styles for this rule are this class. So instead of having a header 1, like that is specifically a class set to header 3, the class can be set to like DA main question, and by default in DocAssemble, that will always be header 3. And so it will follow all the header 3 rules that everyone has existing, and it won't break anyone. And then in our specific CSS, we can set the style of DA main question to be normal, to be the good size, and it doesn't break everything. It doesn't like solve accessibility out of the box for all of DocAssemble, but that's what I'm afraid like is just going to bog us down, and no one will be happy by the end. Like some users will get mad, and I feel Jonathan's he's very good at like backwards compatibility stuff, and so I don't think he'll want to change everyone out of the box. And so, but if that's a thing we could
connect your style to the content on the page. So if you don't use the existing relationship between the headers and the content themselves, then you lose the connection. I mean, the CSS won't apply, right?
Can you say that again? I don't think I'm following.
I'm just thinking, okay, the CSS rules apply to content tags, right? So if you don't have those tags, whatever you set in your CSS won't apply. You can have.
Well, we can't change the HTML of the page.
Right.
DocAssemble creates that.
We can't do it without a PR at least. Yeah. But to answer Bryce's question, Lily or Michelle might know better, but my understanding is no, you can't. Maybe it's a new feature of CSS, but I don't think you can say this CSS class is equal to that other CSS class. Can you?
No, you can create a variable and then refer to both of the and refer to the variable in both places, but you can't copy.
Okay.
But it does seem like a fix for our interviews would be just to use H2 and below instead of H4 and below. And then to change the class equals H3 to exactly match the class equals H1. We can just copy the CSS. For that.
You
make
can
it
do
very-
H1, H3 exactly matches.
Yeah, we could do a very specific selector that only gets that title of, or that first like main question text.
No, I think we'd have to duplicate the CSS rule. wouldn't
We would, but we would duplicate it for the selector H1.H3.
Okay. Yes, I
Yeah.
see what you mean. Yep. So that would be a patch we'd have to do for every time we made a new theme. Because if someone's theme changed that style of H1, we'd have to change it again to be the new style for H1.H3.
Yeah.
there's no way for us to delete the H3 class with CSS only. And we
Yeah.
can't make it equal to something else with CSS only either, correct?
Well, we can make it equal to
JavaScript.
style. We can just change its style.
We can change the styles, but we can't make it going forward automatically. If someone makes a new theme and imports it, they'd have to make that change again to match the new.
Yes. H1.h3. H1.h3 is a way to avoid changing all the other H3s. I mean, that doesn't solve any of the other H3s. And I don't know what other places he's using those kinds of classes. He's using that kind of solution, but
Like I said, I'm pretty sure this is it.
well,
for now.
that kind of solution, not that solution specifically, but that kind of solution. And
I'm
that
pretty
might
sure
be it.
it's the only place he's done it because it
Oh,
was
awesome.
came from this presentation on accessibility, and it was explicitly about the order of hierarchy top chain stuff. I could be wrong, but you're saying we're not sure. Yes, of course we're not sure, but I am pretty sure. Pretty sure. It's the only one.
That might
Here's
be
a thing.
something we can ask him for clarification on.
It is worth asking, I think.
Yep.
I mean, I really want him to just delete that class, or at least make it an option, given that all the other solutions require doing manual work on anytime we theme forever.
Yeah.
And it's gonna, what is it gonna go from? Let's see. What is the size of H1 is 2.5 rem, is that what we said?
Yep.
Yeah, and then H2 is 2 rem.
I was looking this up. H3 is like 1.8, I think. 1.6 maybe.
7.5. Okay.
5.
I mean, if everyone's top level title grew a little bit and the order was still correct, do they care? Some people do, but
Some
they
people
might already
could.
have made some other workaround for accessibility. That's the only thing to keep in mind.
Yeah.
I don't really know what to do about it, but it doesn't feel like there's an easy thing. Oh, we'll just do this because we can't really.
Yeah.
I mean, we could use JavaScript to fix it, I guess, but that's kind of
Yeah, that doesn't feel good at all.
That would get messy.
and I guess we can't count on people's screen readers having the JavaScript applied, right? Presumably people rely on JavaScript enough that they would run the JavaScript first, but maybe not.
I think that feels very specific to screen readers and probably not universal. And at least I've some of the stuff that I've read of like some ways of adding classes and adding like particular HTML attributes like screen readers don't catch specifically, but I don't know.
I mean,
Yeah.
screen reader wouldn't care because if we just get rid of the H3 class, the screen reader isn't going to care about the classes.
Yes,
that is
yeah, they don't care about
notoriously-
the classes, but they might care about. Well, I guess yeah. So sorry, that's fair.
But you're introducing one if people don't have JavaScript, but then Docker symbol wouldn't work in general, I suppose. But to a possible bounce where it switches very visibly from one size to another, which people also find disconcerting.
Oh, that's a good point too, as far as that goes, JavaScript. You could probably control when it runs through different techniques, but yeah. Maybe not well enough to make it always guaranteed to not be visible. I feel like we have two choices. One, do a bunch of manual work forever. Two, just accept that the themes will never match visually when you're generating them. They're always going to be looking not matching what you explicitly said by adding those like classes, right? That would be the other solution to each heading level. Or lobby Jonathan. So I don't think any of those are work-free solutions, from what I
Yeah.
understand.
I feel the second, if documented well, such that we're not burdening people who are just trying to figure out how to get things to work. But if you're a designer and you know what you're doing, we can document it very well that like, hey, there's some weird path dependency stuff in DocAssemble. Don't look at H2 and H1 and H2. Like I feel if documented well too is the best option.
Adding the class equals H4, I guess.
Yeah.
To H2.
Yeah, because I don't feel like there's any other way of getting around the fact that we will break someone somewhere else if we try and get it up in core.
Well, let's think about like who. Well, okay, I hear you. I mean, who will not change anything? They don't care what size H1 is. People who don't change anything won't care about it at all. People who do have custom styles are the exact people who would be most burdened by having to do this thing for going forward. It feels stupid to make a feature flag for this. I wish, but it does seem like.
I mean, an
This is one where you're
accessibility issue
really
is,
it's accessibility and it will really save people time in the future. And there are other things that are less noticeable to end users that Jonathan's put behind feature flags.
Is this maybe we should just try and actually have this feels like a simple enough thing that it might get some traction in the DocAssemble Slack of like, I don't know, we've laid out all these options and it is like layout that it is a big problem for like getting your, not for making DocAssemble itself more accessible, but for making sure that everyone who writes interviews for DocAssemble, making sure those are all accessible. So
I don't know how to like do it diplomatically, but I do feel that people in the community should generally be aware that the solution they are implementing for this style issue is an accessibility issue.
yeah, and that's fair.
Like regardless of other things, but I don't know how to do that in a kind of.
I think Jonathan is very
respectful way.
interested in accessibility fixes. I think he's less of a design person. So for him, the overhead of making people who are designers do this may not be as apparent or as high priority for him. But to me, it just seems like we have an accessibility fix. We make every designer just because of some people who designed stuff a long time ago.
Or, I mean, not a long time ago.
Not a
but
long time ago. Most 4 years, I guess.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, I wonder if we could just do the feature flag in a PR too. And because there are like I said, it's not like a new thing for Jonathan to add configuration options that control different settings that change default behavior. I just really hate that having these extra classes that don't match. And that, yeah, I mean, I think it's like a real problem that you have designers, you're trying to implement their design. It's a big pain as someone who's not a designer to implement someone else's design. And then if you also have to translate everything, the metrics off like by 4 levels or 3 levels, I guess, that just makes it so burdensome for people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not
It's
really
not
good.
fun.
Too bad we didn't just bite the bullet and make everything H1 from the beginning, because then it would have been fine.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have been fewer people impacted if it had, when it was like that 3-year-old ITC presentation, I believe.
Mm.
It would have not affected as many people as it would today. All right.
Dependency.
Yeah. Are you okay with asking that, Bryce?
To the Slack
I mean,
channel in general.
To the Slack channel in general.
Okay.
These are the options we came up with. We think we should have this be a configuration option so people can use a new, better behavior.
Mhm. Okay.
I know I'm being pushy about it, I realize. But
No, it's fair. It is. I think it is a worthwhile question. So I can rephrase all that we've done. Thank you for the notes. That will actually help a lot. And so yeah, I can make a question about it.
Okay. We're at time, so I just wanted to do a check in. Let's see people availability, and we dominated it with things that I thought were most interesting without getting to other things questions people had. So do people want to stick around? I guess we should jump right to the accessibility checker question that you brought up, Bryce, and then to Lily's questions about the survey feature, if people have time to stick around for those.
I think I can stick around.
The other option is Bryce
Mhm.
having an offline conversation with Michelle, and I could probably have an offline conversation with Lily.
Yeah, and it's one of the, it's at least
Break.
priority for the accessibility checker with Kelm is it would be nice to get it in because it would just make things easier, but it's also at the point where like I can run things manually and I am probably the only person directly interested in the next few weeks or so in like running these checks and like actually parsing them and understanding them. And so that's fine to just keep on a manual branch for the next few weeks. It's like essentially no rush. It would be nice, but it's no rush, and I can hang on to things for a little longer.
Okay.
Lily, do you want to? So that was a good summary. So it sounds like it would be okay for us to postpone that.
Yeah, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Have that question. Lily, do you want to just summarize the questions about survey features so we can quick overview so we can make a decision about those questions?
Yeah, well, I mean, they're not urgent right now. And some of them are not urgent. I can delay them until next week. One question that I need to answer now is about the stats. I can see the tables be useful, but at the moment I cannot visualize a chart that could be useful. So I think maybe we can just skip the chart for now. Just do the tables and then maybe do the filter based on the date. So in case there are too many records in a for a particular interview, you can just filter this through the date then to reduce the size of the output. Is that a reasonable assumption?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I like the map, the heat map. Sometimes it's helpful to share that, but it's not a core feature. The main feature is getting the Excel output. So I would agree with that priority.
Yeah, the Excel and also I got the table working right now. I'm displaying the count of each answer and the percentage of that count over the total submission number.
Okay, so it's like a summary table.
Right. So in a way, this is almost like not a stats, it's more of a data report type of display, because we're showing the complete answers, not just one piece out of the whole interview, like the zip for the existing stats.
Yeah, it'll be the full answers that people chose to say it. So I think
right.
Usually I think people might use it to store everything. We're only using it to store anonymous data, and the default is only the zip, but in theory, we could be storing a lot more than just the zip code. And some of our interviews do that. So with up to code, for example, I made it store things that the grant writers were interested in knowing, like what conditions people selected.
Yeah, so a related question is, at least for us to think about, is that do we want to save the survey answers into the same database table from the regular stats, or should we use a separate one? Because the nature of the data is different, the structure is different, and how we extract the data is different.
So if I'm understanding right, so for this interview saving feature, we're using a dedicated file name for the answers. So we could decide to ignore that dedicated file name, right? It's also using the JSON because the storage features, because those can be indexed more quickly than loading, like 30 database rows and then decrypting them or unpickling them. But you can use a separate key. So it's using a dedicated spot in the JSON storage object. So we could do something like that. You can have like associated with one session, you can have like 5 sets of JSON metadata that you're storing. One of them could be the snapshot feature that we're really thinking about with interview stats, the default key, or you can add an extra key prefix of your choice that distinguishes the different sets. And we're using that feature only on one file name right now, but it's going to be used for the metadata of the save and load answer set feature. Is that relevant to what you were asking?
It is, but the reason I asked that question is because first of all, I think on Jonathan's website, he suggests that we use a separate, if we want to do a data report kind of thing, we should use a separate database for that purpose.
Okay. Well, I think the nice thing is I don't think we have to choose when we design the feature. I think we could say, isn't that a global configuration option? Or am I wrong?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he said he needed to do in a config file, and just like give it a name or something, and then when you pull the data, you use that you connect to that database instead of the regular default database.
Okay. So I think the answer is we maybe would eventually, but we don't have to choose because we can, each interview owner, each server owner at least can decide. They can decide that on their own.
But our code has to connect. I mean,
I see what you're saying here.
It's like in our core code where the stats connects to a database, and should the survey interview also connect to that same database or connect to a different one. So that's a code change, not just for, I mean, that's something we would need to change if someone wants to copy our code, right? But at least we need to somehow like make it clear. So that's one consideration. Another one is that in the when we run the survey interview, we save the record twice. Once is for the snapshot, once is for the data report. And as you said, we can use different keys, but that also means the regular stat code needs to modify so that it will select the correct records instead of select every record. It has to look at the key.
Well, so I don't think that the save snapshot feature, you're talking about this answer set feature that I demoed, right?
No, I'm sorry. No, I'm talking about the regular stats saving feature and the one I'm working, because the survey interview needs to save the record for the survey answers, right? And that's where I also use the save snapshot, but I gave it a specific data structure so that it only saves the answers from the survey interviews. That's why I'm saying the result of this one is different from the regular where you just save zip code.
I think I understand now. So distinguishing between stats and and a survey. Survey, basically the difference is the survey has more information.
Yeah, it's the completed answers from the interview.
Okay, I get it. So do you want to use, so stats, I think we could use the built-in store variable. So do we want to,
Yeah, just something to think about. You don't have to make a decision now. I mean, I don't need an answer. Just
Yeah.
bring it up for you to think about.
I don't think we have to worry about using a different database. I think you might make it a parameter. So I'm doing that here, like the key, I just use this parameter and have a default value. So maybe, but I'm not sure if people will combine the two things. So let's say that you ran a survey interview and you wanted to get all of the interview answers from that survey. You could use that same data set to replace what you would be getting from the interview statistics. It would be more information that you needed for statistics, but maybe it would be exactly the same actually, because maybe the whole point was we're trying to survey a wide population and our stats are all of the information they give us.
Yeah, but the question is, okay, in this survey interview, do I also save a record for the stats, in addition to save the interview answers? In other words, I will save two records, one for the stats, one for the data report.
I don't think so. I think people would probably be able to get the stats level data from the main record of that survey. Because what we're doing with the stats data right now is we did kind of hard code this idea of the zip code, but I don't think it's that important if we broke away from that. I mean, I used it for a couple reports, but it's not important for us to not break compatibility with that. We could change that assumption. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's really the same use. Just one has more information, one has less. But you wouldn't really ever need to use the less and the more together. You would either just use the more or just use the less, right? Is my guess. That said, letting people pass a key name to append to like make the records unique is a good idea. And just making it default to something like none or an empty string or whatever makes it so it uses the default location is probably the best way to go. Just let people change it if they have a reason to.
So are you saying that in Weaver, we're going to remove that line where it says save snapshot?
I'm saying the save snapshot feature right now in the Weaver creates a record in the default location in the database. The JSON storage table is where it ends up going.
Yeah.
And we just keep that as is.
Right.
But if you want to have a parameter to the function you're building to let people say, I don't want to use the default location, I think that makes sense.
No, my saved questions, it's a second call to snapshot.
It does it
first of all-
2 times. Okay.
So
In that
first of
case, I
all-
would say if people want to save the survey answers, it would replace the existing call to store variable snapshot,
Right.
because it would be going to the same location and it would have more information than they got from the save snapshot feature.
Right. Right.
I
That's
don't
what-
think we need both in one interview in the Weaver. All right.
So then at least for this, for the survey interview, I'm going to remove that one from the output, right? The snapshot from the output.
Yes,
Okay.
that would be the route I would take. And yeah, we don't even have to worry about the other use cases right away. We can wait till someone has them for real.
Okay. Okay. Then that's a simple solution. I think
Okay.
we would have to save twice. As okay, then we probably want to separate them. Okay, I like that. That's
Yeah,
great.
I get why you were asking that now. That makes a lot of sense. Yep, I just don't think we'll need to do it that way. So, okay, great. yeah, I'll be on Teams and have be able to answer other questions there. And then we'll see everybody later this week.
So you still want me to push the code to somewhere, right?
I'd be interested to see what you have in progress. I mean, I think it's good to have work in progress in a branch. I
Okay.
don't know. We didn't really get to talk about my question about storing the data of the interview. So for one of these interviews I'm working on right now, the person who it's for, a client asked for an Excel spreadsheet with all of the variables. And I was thinking, gee, that sounds really a lot like what we're doing for the save snapshot feature interview stats. And then we also have been talking about having some platform independent representation of the data that the court could get. There's all these things that are around like, what's the data of this interview? And it's not the whole JSON representation of the answers, because that's way too much information. Very often people might need to map from a variable name in one system to a variable name in a different system. So they might want to have the data and then transform it inside DocAssemble, right? Just like we map from a PDF to the DocAssemble variables.
Okay.
So it just seems like a common enough use case that we might be able to figure out how to solve it at a high level in the assembly line framework. But maybe that's not true. Maybe it's better to let people specialize for different tasks. I just was interested to see how you'd approached it. I think I already solved it for that client though, just by doing it in, I just used the data table and exporting a dictionary using the DocAssemble table feature. So I just wrote out all the variables and what the values were of them were. A little redundant with.
Yeah, I think writing out all the variables was the first challenging thing I encountered. What I did was I actually generated it from the Weaver side.
Yeah.
So then when it comes to the saved data, I can just grab it and save it, and then the stats can just pick it up.
That's part of what I was thinking, is we should be able to automate it because it's a very mechanical thing. I didn't use the Weaver. I used the utilities get list variables from this file feature. That was really helpful. It wasn't like a finished thing. It doesn't really understand lists correctly or objects, but it was a good start. So yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, really what it is like it's another template output, right? But we just should think in advance of what are the things specific. We could make it a text file that's the template output, but then you end up spending all your time worrying about the syntax of the text file. It just feels like we should make a little simplified interface for this purpose. And I'm not sure what it is yet, but we want to make it really easy as using skip undefined and having the list of variables for the PDF, the field statement in the PDF attachment block. It should be like something as easy to use as that, I think. And with some of the same conveniences, like being able to skip undefined things. So, but maybe that is just using a data block. That's basically what I did.
And maybe show you what do we have now? It's getting really late.
Yeah, no, I know. I think we should probably sign off for today, but
Yeah.
it's not urgent, but
Okay.
it's just something to think about, I guess. How can we solve this big problem with some of the things we're working on the sides of?
Yeah, I think it could be very useful. Yeah, well, the next week or whenever we have time, we can discuss it, because I was thinking it could also be used for other purposes. Just like whatever. Anyway, okay,
Yeah.
I'm done. Thank you.
Yep. If we sent this data to the court in some like, hey, you can use this later thing, that would actually be one of our goals for Pew too. So it's really something we should solve somehow. Just think about it.
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing. You think about all these forms, we do all this fancy work and we make the form look pretty and this and that. But at the end of the day, what is really matter? What does it really matter? It's the fields and their values, right?
Yeah. Exactly that. I was like, why haven't we solved this? Why haven't we, is it as simple as it seems? Is it really like one overlapping problem, or is it just, it kind of seems the same, but really every time it's a different facet of it, and it really doesn't need one fix? Yeah, I just don't know. I mean, maybe I should ask on the Slack and just see what other people's thoughts are on that. Maybe it's too big a question to ask that way, though. I don't know.
Yeah, it would probably depend on who is on the receiver side, what they expect to receive.
Yes, I think that's a big part of it too. It's like no one really is receiving these things yet. Although I feel like a lot of private firms are interested in that. They're like, hey, we just want the data. We want to be able to do whatever we want with it. But courts aren't ready to accept it yet.
Yeah, but in reality, everything has become more and more digital, more and more digital. So it's really the communication of database from one place to another.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think one thing to keep in mind too is most people who have a casual need for this do not want to. Oh, Bryce has to hop up too. I was going to ask him a question about it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that means we should probably sign off. We can check in again about it later.
No, we can
Right,
check it
okay.
later.
Right.